Hello, everybody, and welcome to an episode of Toonkind at 12 FPS. I am Oatmeal. I will be playing the Professor. And with me,
Hi, I'm Gail. I'm also here, and I will be playing You Audience.
yes, um, this is taking place after the Late Night Speechbubble interview with uh, Grimm Crowley, Headmaster. Oh, he's old school in the mirror. Um,
Professional douchebag.
uh-huh. And while Professor wasn't in the audience, he did get uh a uh he did get a sort of report of it from Azumi later. Because he really wanted to know what happened.
Professor
um
is not beating the nosy allegations.
no, absolutely not. Um so he probably doesn't not that these things were explicitly revealed anyway, but like he probably still doesn't know who got overblotted except for Juby.
hmm
Um
hmm
but yeah. So uh he knows the Crowley stuff and he wants to check in on you cuz it's been a bit. Um and it's uh let's see, I don't does he know that there's been an overblock? No, I don't think he does. But he knows that um the others in the audience came over to like hang out with him and talk to him about the interview and stuff and just check in on him.
hmm hmm
They made it a whole thing. There were pastries and stuff. Um some bad movies, I think. So while Professor missed that, he is coming over. So he will knock on Yu's apartment door. I don't think he gave notice this time either.
Yep, but it's okay. Not, um. Most of you's guests don't exactly call ahead of time. That's kind of what happens when your friend group is this friend group.
Yeah, it's like, have you guys even heard of RSVP?
Have you heard of RSVP? Have you heard of at least calling ahead? Have you heard of fucking knocking? Have you heard of not just picking my lock and walking through my door? That was how
Oh,
he
you're
knew
lucky,
something
Professor.
was that was how he knew something was wrong when Juby came to visit. Was Juby picked the lock but didn't just walk through the door?
Aw. He Yu's lucky the Professor doesn't know knock anymore. um
Then the professor would have been able to do the you holy fuck meme.
um but yeah, he knocks.
Um and there's a call from inside of be right there before, the usual shuffle of somebody moving around inside and then getting the door.
Hmm.
And you looks around, spots the professor, blinks in surprise, and is just, oh, I didn't know you were coming. Hi.
Hello. Is this a bad time?
Oh, no, not at all. Would you like to come in?
Yes, thank you.
And he will sort of step aside and pull the door open a bit more.
Yeah, he'll come inside. He'll find somewhere to lean against a counter or wall or something.
Mm-hmm. And you will go to put some water on the stove for tea.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
Um, can I have the professor roll either perception or medicine?
Absolutely. Uh, Let me see which one of those is higher because I think it's perception. Um, what is my medicine? Yeah, not great. All right. Perception. That's gonna be 16.
Yeah, so, professor, something is different, and not in a good way.
Mm.
Um, the last time you saw you, never not funny to me. The last time you saw you, he had been, his design had been starting to simplify
Mm-hmm.
as the ink stains had been starting to spread further up.
Mm-hmm.
I forget exactly how far they were the last time these two spoke.
It was like last I remember, it was like all up his limbs and like encroaching around his neck from the shoulders, but like not on his torso yet.
Yeah. So it's at this point it is basically almost all the way up to uh his neck just completely.
Mm.
Um and that simplification of his design has gotten significantly worse. You're pretty sure that people's arms and legs are not supposed to be all one thickness. That's not
Mm.
normal.
Yeah. Hmm. He does just kind of take a second to like look and uh just, brow furrows a little bit. So, uh how hmm how have you been physically? Um have there been any other uh overblots since last time? I remember there were 3 and then a few cases.
Hmm? Oh, yeah, there was another one that had to get handled.
Hmm. And uh how have you been? The uh blot seems to have progressed.
Yeah, that's certainly one way to put it. Um, I've been dealing with it, as one does. Um,
Mm-hmm.
Nothing majorly new to report aside from I don't remember if the mild narcolepsy was a thing when we last spoke, but it certainly is a thing now.
I see. I know you were tired. I'm not sure if it was quite to that point.
Mm. Yeah, if I don't have something active to do, I can't really keep myself awake.
Mm-hmm.
And I don't really have control over when I do or don't fall asleep.
Mm-hmm. Hmm. If I may ask, has the uh, spreading of these inky blotches had any mm, other effects uh, on your health, on your experience?
Well, I mean,
because considering what they did to your limbs...
Oh, right. You aren't aware of that. Yeah, so don't freak out, but I don't have organs anymore.
Ah. Hmm. Disconcerting, I imagine.
It, it's not pleasant. Um,
No.
yeah. It went
It's...
for the digestive system first and then the rest.
Mm-hmm.
I'm pretty sure I've still got my lungs because I can still talk, but
Hmm.
the last
Toon
thing I.
logic can take care of a good deal of that anyways.
Yeah. The last thing I felt go was my heart. And let me tell you,
Mm.
that hurts. It's been a while since anything has actually been painful, but that one hurt like a motherfucker.
Yes. Believe it or not, I know how that feels. Not fun.
No. You have my sympathies.
And you mine. Hmm. I... Well, I think I said it before, but the fact that you are a Toon is absolutely saving your life. Um, I, thanks to the logic of this place and uh, the proper ink that makes up Toons, they can get away with a lot. Um, I don't. I some Toons don't have proper organs and such bones. Um, or if they do, it's only for the gag or when it's relevant.
That sounds like a terrifying way to live, but I can't really judge at
Mm,
this point.
mm. You should. You could ask Tome sometime.
Hell, I've been warned that at some point he might be coming to talk to me, but.
Hmm. Warned?
Uh, mm, I don't. Mr. Tome scares me a bit. Let's put it that way.
Oh, why?
Well, we've met, not under the best circumstances,
He was at Juby's block.
and Minamis.
Ah. Ooh. Oh. Okay, I think I'm starting to understand what might have been the problem.
Yeah, most parents aren't going to be pleased with you when you put their child in near lethal danger once. I did it twice, and I didn't mean to, but it
No,
still
never.
happened, and I can still understand being upset at the one person who is visibly responsible.
Yes, and he can be a bit rash.
He's never done anything, you know, cruel. It's just I
Good.
am fully aware of.
He's just been rude and mean, I'm guessing.
Well, no, not even that. He's actually been pleasant the few times we've had to interact in person. I just.
Oh,
The man's like double my height.
true.
He's fucking intimidating. And I'm like 90% sure he doesn't like me.
No.
With
Well,
good reason.
well, he he doesn't like a lot of people at first meeting.
I've been told
But
that.
he can grow to like you. He didn't trust me at all. First time we met. Um, Now we're really good friends.
The first time we interacted in person outside of one of the blot incidents, I wound up accidentally partially squishing a woman's insides out.
I think I remember you telling me about that. There was a knife person and a donut person.
Don't laugh, that was terrifying. I felt so bad.
I believe you.
I felt so
Uh,
bad. I didn't mean to hurt her. She was a lovely lady.
mhm.
Unfortunately, usual first aid procedures do not apply when dealing with living pastry.
No, no.
And I panicked.
Um, well, of course. You were only doing what you uh were, I imagine, trained to do in a first aid situation.
Yeah, well, trained is a loose word, but yeah.
Mm. Oh, that reminds me. He takes he reaches into his pocket, and takes out, a book. It's kind of like, it kind of looks like a thin textbook. Like, it's definitely the size of like a textbook, like paper wise, but it's a thin, uh, thing. Um, you, uh, it occurred to me that, um, I don't know if anyone's told you about basic, uh, toon biology, and while there are a multitude of inconsistencies, um, there are a few, general, rules that are generally followed that can be helpful to know. I've got um, uh, sort of a beginner's, primer here.
Oh, that would be helpful, I think. Although I do worry I might be a bit of an outlier at this point.
For now, yes, I think. Um, there's, probably nothing, I can think of, uh, about how you're living that you would need to do any different, but, there's a few useful notes, while you sort of, uh, tune from real kind. You've traded a few, sort of minor, uh, resistances, weaknesses, and strengths. While you are much less likely to get a concussion, for example, you do want to uh, avoid nail polish remover, like it's a deadly acid.
Oh, that actually makes sense. Doesn't acetone act as a paint thinner?
Exactly. Yes.
Ah, noted. Good thing I don't have a habit
Right.
of painting my nails.
That said, you can get. I I'm not entirely sure how it works, but you can get tune made nail polish remover, and that works fine
It's
because
probably
it's
alcohol based instead of acetone based.
perhaps. But if you were to get any real kind, um, acetone, uh, that's going to be a problem. But that's the sort of thing uh, that you could get from this. So he'll just put the book like on a nearby counter.
Thank you for that.
Sure. Hmm. So I know that there were a bunch of people over after that interview happened. I imagine you heard about that from them.
I'm. Yes, I have been made aware that several unfortunate souls were saddled with the bullshit of dealing with my ex headmaster.
Yes. I I do wonder because I got a basic account of the interview. I do wonder about one thing that was discussed that if you know any more about might be helpful to us.
I can certainly try.
Um, there was a mention of a shadow confrontation as an old practice that doesn't exist anymore, and the form it exists in now is the Overblot.
Mm.
Um, it was said. Let's see. It was. I think he said it used to be something that was um, collaborative. It brought you power by overcoming your individual something, but with the help of other people. I think by nature. Um, he changed it so that it could be performed. Well, tried to change it so that it could be performed by an individual without any help.
And he fucked it
Um,
up.
exactly.
Yeah. Um. So I've told you about how sometimes there's things I know that I don't know how I know them.
Mm.
Here's another one. That ritual was around during basically the time when old trade was still used, apparently.
Mm.
And it wasn't just a way to gain power. It was the culmination of a mage's personal training in the arts of magic.
Mm.
It was how you acquired your permanent spellcasting focus.
Ah.
As what it did, and he kind of frowns and leans against the counter himself, putting a hand to his head, a bit like he has a headache.
Mm.
What it did was you you summoned it and you fed into it until it, for lack of a better term, hatched,
Mm.
and you did this with the assistance of companions because they were able to keep you alive and able to complete the severance portion of the ritual, which
Mm.
is what I and now several others have been doing with the current strain of Overblot.
Mm-hmm.
And in the end, you would be separated from some deep seated personal flaw or struggle, hence the
Mm.
term severance, and the sort of released power from that would be channeled into an item called an athame.
Mm-hmm. Is that the is that the same as the staff and mask that what was it, really powerful Fae use?
No, I don't think
No.
so.
Mm,
He kind of frowns and shakes his head. Just ugh, that always feels so weird. No, the
mm,
staff and mask thing is a deliberate. I mean, it is a deliberate ritual similar to, I guess, what Overblot used to be, but
mm.
it's
A
not
little different.
it's not the same thing. It's
Mm,
to make an athame, you have to confront something about yourself that hurts you.
mm,
Meanwhile, to make a mask, you focus on your identity and who you are as a person, and
mm,
to make a staff, you basically just channel your power into a physical form.
mm, mm, mm. Okay. Oddly, it seems almost like here in Inkwell, it's become the Overblot has become a little bit more like its old form, the Shadow Confrontation, because it's required multiple people these
Yes.
past few times.
Yeah. I don't know what that's about, to be honest. It used
I
to
don't
just
know.
be me on my own, but maybe, I don't know, maybe somewhere in the shuffle things got knocked back into place, like when you drop something important and it jostles it
Mm,
enough that the wires connect and it suddenly starts working again.
perhaps. I.
Oh, speaking of things needed to make things work, um
Mm,
and uh hang on. Yep, okay. You reaches into hammer space uh and pulls out a rather large chunk of black marble,
mm-hmm.
uh, which he will very quickly set on the ground because, oh, that's heavy.
Uh-huh.
Uh, and then gestures at it with a little bit of a proud smile. You
Ah,
mentioned you needed this, so, I
yes.
remembered I had some left over from doing the countertops back at Ramshackle.
Mm-hmm. Thank you. This will this will work very well. Um, he's going to uh he does he takes it and he lifts it up uh onto to just sort of like rest slightly on the counter.
Mm-hmm.
Um and opens his pocket under it and just kind of like tips it in, and weirdly it seems to warp to fit inside.
Pockets of holding. Impressive.
Yes. Not maybe not quite as impressive as Hammer Space, but works well enough.
I think the most impressive thing I've noticed about Hammerspace is that I'm able to get stuff that I reasonably have no reason to be able to. I
Oh
am
yes.
I'm 90% sure I left that in the shed back at Ramshackle, but I knew it was
Mm-hmm.
there, so I knew I could get it. I don't know how I knew that, but that's
Mm-hmm.
just the story of my life now. Knowing things without knowing how I know things.
Yes, it does seem to have a bit of a odd sort of uh, creation, summoning aspect to it. It's not, well, like a bag of holding. It's only what you put in that you can take out.
Mm-hmm. It's
Uh,
honestly kind of fascinating.
Absolutely. But thank you very much. That'll be, uh, that takes care of that. That's going to be very useful.
I'm glad. There actually was something I needed to talk to you about, though. So I'm actually
Oh,
quite glad you visited.
mm-hmm.
Um, I think I don't remember if we had, for lack of a better term, switched tactics by the last time you visited me.
Between mm,
I know last
trying
time,
to go home, not.
yeah, I know last time you visited, we had the fun realization that going home is not an option.
Mm,
Um, but I don't think getting this thing off me, and he gestures at the mark on his throat, is an option either.
ah,
Um,
okay.
so
Mm,
I've been needing to talk to you and possibly to Crystal, because you're both
mm,
kind of the science people I know.
mm, mm-hmm.
You're the people I know with the most brain cells at the moment, or at the very least, the most brain cells in this specific specialized area.
Mm-hmm.
Because I love my friends who are homicide detectives, but they tend to handle things post mortem.
Mm, true.
I
Huh.
need to figure out a way to survive that. Because at this rate, I don't know how much longer I can hold this off. And
Mm-hmm.
I I made a promise. I don't want to leave anyone behind.
Mm. He tilts his head.
Jubilee came to visit the other day because of the bullshit with Crowley,
Mm-hmm.
and I promised I would try to stick around.
Ah, I see.
And trust me, I didn't want to die to begin with, but
No, of course not. But it's
now I really
very
can't
difficult.
afford to.
Yeah, I see. Okay. Okay. My initial thought had been trying to find a way to either circumvent. See, I didn't think that there was a way to remove the rune. Considered it, but I think we figured out that that maybe wasn't quite it. Other
It's
ways to
difficult to remove
survive.
something that goes all the way through.
Exactly. Um,
I do prefer not to have open throat surgery. I don't think that's even a thing a
mm,
person could survive.
he like does a so gesture. Um,
Professor, I hate that you apparently have an answer to that.
it's difficult.
Sir!
Look, I've been to other planets. Some of them have really advanced medical technology.
I.
It's not. I don't think it's possible here. No.
You know what? That makes sense, I guess.
Well, I told you about when I told you I couldn't find any M-class planets that in my atlas that matched Earth. Um, it wasn't just something I got from a satellite. They don't even have satellites here yet.
They don't have satellites, but they have
I don't.
television.
I don't. I'm not sure. I don't know. Maybe they'll use cable. No, wait. Oh, the satellite dishes. I think. Wait, no. I
I
don't
was going
know.
to say I'm pretty sure. And he like walks over to one of the windows and looks out and is like, "Yeah, no, look, the building across the way, they've got satellite dishes. What are those picking up?"
I, I'm really not sure. I didn't. Well, uh, I haven't really spent much time in atmosphere. Um. Well, regardless. Off track. Where were we?
The
Something
mystery of the
about.
satellite dishes can be
Uh.
solved another day.
Right. Uh. Planets. Um. Medical technology. That's right. Um. So. Uh, right. So if we can't do that, then we have to find some sort of way hmm, to make it so that when you overblot, it doesn't completely take you out.
Mm-hmm.
Um,
Which
I'm,
might be difficult because, decapitation is a bitch like that.
mhm.
But
If hmm, if we could, I wonder if we could siphon off some of the magic with something else so that it would get less. Don't know. Hmm.
it's possible. I know it's possible to capture blot energy because it's possible to measure it. I know back in the mirror, um, Idia to was able to siphon some of it off of the people who had already overblotted and measure it, for lack of a better term.
Mm-hmm. Crowley said something about only being able to completely contain it with the living being. That nothing else, glass, whatever, seemed to work. But it could be, it could work temporarily. On the other hand, if we're talking about needing to temporarily hold something, um, well, uh, as much as I don't want to expose anyone else to this, if it were possible to take some of hmm, what's in you, it doesn't seem can come back out because of the rune. But when you overblot that surge of energy, if it could be divided into, well, a few other people,
That
if they took on some of it,
I don't like that. That sounds really dangerous.
I I agree. but it seems plausible.
Mm.
After all, it takes people time to uh, actually overblot. So a person who has had no exposure, or I wonder, or people who are already more or less immune to it, people who have already blotted, I wonder if they would be able to just temporarily hold some of the energy and then discharge it some other way after.
Maybe. I know. Hmm. It doesn't work here. I've tried this method here, so I can't use it. But I know that
Mm,
back in the mirror, one of my teachers, Professor Crowle, he taught me to make things with different runes and sigils on them, and I could channel the magic that was stuck in me into those.
mm,
It's Crowley's a moron. It's less that it needs a living vessel and more that it needs something to do.
mm,
What he was trying to do was probably just shove it in a box so he could forget about it somewhere, but if you do that,
mm,
it's going to continue to grow and then it's going to burst out and then it's going to continue being a problem.
mm-hmm.
So it either needs something to eat, and he kind of winces and looks at his hand, or it needs
Or
something to
some way
do.
to expend it? Mm,
It in the end it is still a form of energy. A very
mm-hmm.
negative, very angry, very concussive form of energy that corrupts everything around it, but a form of energy nonetheless.
Mm-hmm. If we could channel it into something, uh, maybe not precisely constructive, in that it would be a positive thing, but constructive in that it would do something, it would perform some kind of work, um, in the physics sense, and something that was, uh, mm, I think we could risk something that would be mildly harmful, uh, if it got rid of it. Um, I
As long as no people get hurt.
mhm.
I
uh,
I don't
something
want
that
other
comes to
people to get
mind.
hurt because of this thing. They didn't ask
I
for
see.
any of that. It wouldn't be fair.
No, but if it comes to it, you'll probably get some volunteers.
That's not a good thing!
I
Are you insane? That's not a good thing, Professor.
well,
That's as noble as modern media tries to make self sacrifice sound, it is incredibly unhealthy of a mindset to have.
not self-sacrifice. I mean taking a small bit of harm to prevent a larger harm. Like uh if to save your life a few people take a small injury, I don't think any of us would have much of a problem with that. I mean, as it is, there's going to be a construct and a fight, presumably.
Yes, and that's going to be enough damage. I've seen how big these things can get when you wait too long.
Mm-hmm.
I one of the later ones that I fought had been left to fester for a couple of years. It was
Mm.
fueled by the grief of one of my classmates
Ah,
losing his younger brother.
grief. Can be powerful.
That thing was the size of a fucking skyscraper.
Oh, goodness.
Yeah, it. The fucking head of it was the size of one of the other construct's entire body.
Hmm. Okay. All right. Well, he sort of puts his hands up in like a placating gesture. My ideas might be a bit extreme, but we're not making decisions here. I'm just sort of going through uh possibilities. Maybe not even things that we would consider as options, but if it helps us get to something that does work,
It's throwing spaghetti at a wall.
then
I get it.
right.
I don't know.
Um
I. The way that I used to handle it was not even getting rid of the overblot energy, but specifically getting rid of the magic that it was feeding on. That was what the charm making was for, was I would create small charms that did different things, and through doing that I was able to get rid of ambient magic. Theoretically,
mhm,
theoretically getting rid of blot energy should be similar, but
mhm.
I suppose it's just a matter of I was able to make the charms because, like you said, they were constructive. They did something.
Mhm.
So it's a matter of finding something that this ickiness can do.
Right. I wonder what could cast blot magic. I mean, what comes to mind is, I don't know, some sort of spell like uh, blight or uh, something with a withering effect. Just from the nature of the magic, uh,
Mm,
circle of death, something like that, that just drains all life in an area. But I mean, if all you've got is a field with some grass in it, then minimal harm done.
mm, that's true. I know. I know I can do certain things with it, but that's. Mm. And he kind of
What kind of?
frowns and raises a hand. Uh, and he hums a few lines of a specific Disney song that I don't know which one it would be.
Sure, yep. There are a lot of them.
There are a lot of them. Basically, he hums a little bit of a song, and the light in the room gets leached out of it,
Hmm.
and basically pulled into his hand as he casts darkness.
Mm-hmm. Okay, I see. Or, well, rather, I don't. But,
That in and of itself is
um,
exemplary.
hmm. This, how does that, um, how did that feel to you?
Not
I know it
great.
was small.
It
Mm,
it wasn't enough to hurt, but it feels cold. He
mm,
lets go of the spell, and the light sort of whooshes back into the room like it's, being let out of a bottle.
mm-hmm.
It's
Mm.
it's like I'm using the Overblot's natural desire to eat something and targeting it.
Uh, trying to figure out if it's a net if it's a net gain there, because it may be unpleasant, but if it did that did it feel like that released any energy? Any small amount? Expended it?
You sort of taps along uh, the edges of the discoloration and is like trying to figure out if it if it retreated any, and
Moved?
he says, well, it didn't make it worse.
That's good.
I can't
But
tell if it helped much. I didn't
mm,
use it for long, and it's a bit of a smaller effect.
mm-hmm.
I know doing bigger things is dangerous. Um
Right.
I in the aftermath of the last incident, it took place on a shore, so I
Uh-oh.
had to get the lingering bits of ink out of the water. And as I'm
Yes.
sure Dyer would tell you, if she was here, I did something maybe not so smart.
Mm,
But in my defense, it was the only answer I could think of, and I was sort of, panicking, running short on time.
mm-hmm.
And I used one of the spells that I know in Old Trade to freeze over the river.
Mm. Oh, wow.
And I used that to crack it open and pull the ink out.
Mm-hmm.
I think.
And you did what with it?
Am I allowed to plead the fifth?
I'm not judging, I just want to know.
I didn't have another way to get rid of it. So
Mm,
I took a page out of Dyer's book and I swallowed it. It was not smart. I was stuck in bed for a week after that and my throat felt like shit,
mm,
but it was the best answer I could think of.
I see.
I didn't exactly have a bottle I could put it in.
No, no, I understand. Huh. Okay, so did you, if you think back, did you feel any different between when you cast the magic and you uh consumed the plot? Because the plot obviously would have made you feel awful again. But when you were casting, did that feel like anything got expended?
I. Mm, it. It felt. The thing about using Old Trade is that it always feels good. It always feels like it's making something better. I don't
Hmm,
know why. I don't know if it's the Overblot compelling me to use more of it, or if it's just that it comes naturally to
unintuitive.
me.
Hmm,
But I. Using Old Trade always makes me feel better. It always makes me feel powerful,
mm-hmm.
which is, dangerous in and of itself because I don't think I don't think we need me going on an egomaniacal supervillain arc, quite frankly.
Mhm.
That would
No.
that would be dangerous for everybody involved. Let's not do that. Um,
Hmm.
but aside from the fact that, it makes my throat feel like it's being cut open from the inside, it always feels good. And that specific spell, because of how I. So, Old Trade is not like this world's magic, from what I understand.
Hmm.
It's not. Part of the reason Crowley hated it so much was because it's not predictable, or it's
Mm.
not specific. It doesn't. You can't just say the words and have the exact thing you want to happen. You have to focus on different feelings, on different ideas, different concepts, different
Mm.
images to get the effect you want. And
Hmm.
because of what is unfortunately very familiar for me, when I was using the Frozen Heart spell to clear the ink from the river, I focused on the image of something being drained, and I used that to drain the heat from the water until it froze over and
Mm.
concentrate the ink into a single space.
Very clever.
Thank you. Professor Crowle always did say that if I had natural magic, I'd be a genius at sympathetic magic. I'm
Mm.
pretty good at putting together different imagery and different symbols. It's always been a fascination of mine. But
Hmm.
doing it that way instead of the way that I'd done it before, because the thing about old trade spells is they're multi-layered. You can use them for multiple things. That's why they were so prolific. Frozen Heart is
Hmm.
useful for retrieving materials from beneath ice, but
Mm.
it's also useful for just creating ice.
Hmm.
And that's the way I've used it before, is I focused on the imagery of water freezing over, of ice growing and expanding. And I
Hmm.
think if I'd done that, it would have been bad, because that would have been pulling more ambient magic in. But by using it to
Mm.
drain, I think. By using it to drain something, I think it. Well, like I said, it
Do
gave
you
the
think?
Overblot something to do.
Right. So it might have, uh, in a sort of backwards fashion, while it was draining the water of heat and draining the ice of the ink, it might have also been draining a bit of blot magic from you.
I think so. Blot magic, blot energy. It's not really its own form of magic, it's really a form of anti
Mm.
magic. But
Right.
blot energy is. The imagery that comes to mind is a black hole. It is
Hmm.
entirely focused on draining and consuming everything around it. It's a black
Hmm.
hole or a parasite or a vacuum. It seeks to be filled. By giving it something to fill it, that burned some of it off, I think.
Hmm.
The issue comes with the fact that if I do that too much at once, this stupid thing, and he
Hmm.
flicks the mark on his neck, will snap.
Hmm. In
And
or out, it always causes damage.
yeah, any
Hmm.
anytime the mark is activated, it damages what's around it because it wasn't meant to go on organic tissue.
Right.
So it would be a matter of, huh, that, hang on. that thing you said earlier, the idea of a field, something
Oh, yes.
where there's a lot of life around and a lot of life that can be expended without hurting anyone.
Hmm.
There is a very powerful healing spell in Old
Hmm.
Trade. If I changed how I think of that for a bit,
Mm.
and instead of focusing on it as light being pushed out, and focused on it instead as pulling life from around in to heal an injury, do you think that could work?
I I think it could. There's a hmm, maybe slightly similar spell here. Only it does actually work person to person. Um, it's it causes it pulls. Actually, there's a few spells. But the one I'm thinking of um pulls some of the life force from the caster and gives it to the person they are trying to heal, um, actually multiplying it, the effect. Um, it's not something that's especially well thought of, but necromancy, you know. But if you were to be able to draw something like that from plant life around you, uh, that's that's different. That
The original version of the spell did use a flower as a focus, or at least it did in the story. It used a flower that was made from, well, the story goes a drop of sunlight. Some say
mm,
it was divine energy, some say it was actual literal sunlight. Stories
mm,
vary, but
mm,
there was this magical flower that if you sang a specific incantation to it would heal you and make you younger.
mm-hmm.
If I
was was it did let me ask the question, what happens to the flower after
It continues to thrive.
does?
The only time that it stopped being able to do what it did was when it was cut.
Mm,
And it was cut because it was used to heal someone who was dying of a terrible illness.
uh-huh.
But even after that, the power of that flower was channeled into the patient's child.
Oh,
And
well.
when the song was
Mm,
sung to her or by her, she was able to use the flower's healing magic.
oh, wow, that's
I
powerful stuff.
It's fascinating.
Absolutely.
I only used it in that form once, and that was the first time I ever dealt with an Overblot incident because the
Mm,
victim was about to die and I didn't even
mm.
really realize what I was doing. I just panicked and
You wanted to help.
I wanted to help, and I knew certain other songs that I had sung had different effects. Like there's one that I had figured out I could use to call for help in a sense.
Mm,
Not with anything major, but, household chores. Having a bunch
mm-hmm,
of little animal friends to help out with them is
mm,
certainly entertaining. Although,
mm-hmm.
all credit to them, squirrels are not very good at doing dishes. It's okay. We
uh,
put them on feather duster duty, and they were much better suited to that.
ah, yes.
But if I like I said, it's all about how you picture it, all about how you imagine the magic,
Mm-hmm,
how you focus it into existence. Your intent matters a lot more with old trade spells than it does with the magic that I understand of this world. This world seems a lot more like Crowley's brand of magic, where there's a set of rules of what makes what effects and what you need to make those effects, and you say these words in this order and this specific thing happens.
Generally speaking, yes, with a few exceptions, but generally yes.
If I were to, instead of focusing on the imagery of something living and growing that can give life to other things because it is that vibrant,
Mm,
focus on the imagery of pulling life from other things
mm,
into something else.
mm.
Maybe I could use that to heal myself as the the rune was trying to slash my throat open.
Ah, I think I think you're right. As long as you stick to the draining energy, the blot should cooperate, and uh, as long as you're not mm, touching a person, then it shouldn't hurt anyone. There's plenty of um, well,
Conveniently
plenty.
empty fields.
Well, I mean there are, but maybe not exactly right here in the city. But we can find one. Um, that could work. That would. Hmm. Actually, now that I think about it, that reminds me of sort of the opposite counterpart of the life transference spell, uh, vampiric touch, which does about what it sounds like. It does harm to, well, with the spell specifically, um, another person in order to heal the caster.
Which is
Um,
unpleasant, but understandable.
Absolutely. Right. But uh if you can draw, old trade is malleable enough, it sounds like, that uh you could make it draw from, I mean, heck, uh, the story that that song is based on involved a plant already, so uh
It's not too hard of a leap to make,
it's
especially
not.
since there is a version of the story where the plant is expended to get rid of a disease.
Absolutely.
So it would just be focusing on a different element of the story, and that's
Hmm.
considerably easier than some of the other stuff I've done.
Hmm.
I've had to turn a I've had to turn one of the most dangerous spells in the old trade set list into a harmless song I could sing at a jazz lounge. That was
Oh.
considerably more difficult, especially because I know nothing about composition.
Ah.
I turned a spell that was able to create a soul contract into basically just a funny light show by
All
changing up the
right.
tempo.
Hmm. Wow, that's impressive.
It I was proud of myself for that piece. And the look on Azul's face was fucking priceless.
Hmm. I think uh when this is over and you can actually interact with magic in a normal fashion, I think bardic magic might interest you for just for the connection to singing alone.
I've we had concepts of bardic magic at home. Obviously, they were all
Hmm.
fiction, but the few times that I did look into it, it did look fun.
Mhm.
But then
I
again,
enjoy
I've
it.
always been a bit of a theater kid at heart.
Yes, well, it's a fine art. Well,
It's. But do you
mhm.
think that could work?
I do think that could work. I let's see. When would you have to do it? Are you still conscious when the blot comes on and there's a construct?
Uh, Semi conscious. I don't know
Mm-hmm.
exactly
Mm-hmm.
because I've obviously never overblotted before, but I've asked people who
Mm-hmm.
have, and the consensus seems to be outside of a few specific cases, specifically people who are very skilled in enchantment magic.
Mm.
My friend Vil was a unique case in that he seemed to remember everything that happened.
Oh, wow.
He was really upset about it too. He was so
Mm.
upset at himself, and I felt terrible
Uh,
for him. Because, especially because his blot really wasn't his fault. He just got dealt a really shitty hand.
mm.
I swear I could strangle Nije. Anyway,
Mhm. So,
most of
at
the
least
time,
partially.
once you cross the point of no return and you once the transformation portion is activated, there isn't you don't lose consciousness, but you do lose control.
I see.
You're effectively running on instinct.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. The blot probably has more control.
It's amplifying every bad impulse that you have.
I see. Okay, so at what point would we have you try to heal then?
I think if I could. So, the way that Overblot works is usually it's called in by an overuse of magic. I remember the first time I ever saw it, it
Oh.
it was because one of my classmates, Riddle, he was effectively throwing a temper tantrum.
Mm-hmm.
And his special magic was that his unique spell allowed him to completely cut off someone else's magic
Oh, my.
for a temporary period of time. He called it off with your head because
Mm.
it summoned a sort of magic collar that stopped someone from using their magic, which for them
Mm.
in that world was very much like being without your head.
Absolutely.
And he was angry and upset over the fact that, um, well, another classmate of mine may have called him out on his tyrannical bullshit,
Mm-hmm.
because he was being a bit of a brat. For good
Mm-hmm.
reason. I understand why he did it, but he did need to get taken down a peg.
Mm-hmm.
Um, and I will never forget how proud I was of Ace for looking at a magic duel and saying, nah, actually, and then punching the man in the face. That was
Nice.
fucking priceless. They never expect that you still have the power of your fucking fists.
Absolutely not.
You know, you can use magic. Everyone expects you to use magic. And then you come in with a steel baseball bat and they're completely confused.
Absolutely. I not too long ago thwarted a spellcaster by uh, a bard specifically by simply sticking my hand in his mouth.
You what?
I stuck my hand in his mouth so that he couldn't cast.
I, that is both hilarious and genius and incredibly unsanitary.
I know.
You do realize
It
the
was.
average person's mouth has, a roughly similar effect to a Komodo dragon.
I do. I don't know if it would have made a difference that he was a toon, sort of, uh, Aarakocra design, a bird. So sharp beak. That wasn't great, but um,
Why didn't you just... And he kind of pantomimes, like, shutting the bird's mouth by pinching it.
it, he his face is like this big. Like he uh he gestures like a football shaped like that he looks like the engineer from those movies. That's a lot of beak to hold shut.
Okay, fair, and I assume there weren't any conveniently placed very large rubber bands.
No,
Tragic.
no, no, but it worked for the few seconds I needed it to work.
Amazing. Oh, I would have
Um,
paid to be a fly on the wall for that interaction.
uh, um, okay, so if we have you, well, this is great. So then, in this case, we can even purposefully induce the overblot and be prepared for it. Uh, you'll cast the healing spell. It will trigger the overblot, but also hopefully simultaneously hold your um, the rune injury uh, at bay well enough that, well, people can solve your overblot. Have to uh, fight the construct, get pulled into ink space, and uh, I, as the sort of um, primary host of Inkblot, I have a feeling that your um, whatever sort of puzzle or problem you've got is going to be a doozy. But um, I mean, we'll do our best to get through it as fast as possible, and hopefully you'll be uh,
Alive when you get back.
eh, yes, to put it bluntly,
If I
because
can...
then because then we can work from there.
Yeah. And if I can get through getting it to manifest, then
Mm-hmm.
that's half the hard part done. The other dangerous part is when the construct's head is shattered. Because
Mm-hmm.
that and the transformation are the two biggest expulsions of magic.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. That's right. That the I guess that the shattering, that's where the probably the most of that um that the goop left over comes from
Yeah.
when it's all over.
Yeah. When it when the thing is killed,
Mm.
from what I understand, I mean, I've never seen it happen, but I've heard it described. When the thing's head is shattered, it doesn't just poof.
Mm.
It's like the construct melts.
Mm.
I'm trying to remember the way it was described. It's like it falls apart because it no longer has, I guess it no longer has what was fueling it. If all
Mm.
of the emotions and magic that were driven into it were in the bottle, bottling up emotions, haha, very funny,
Hmm.
then
And physically destroying it sort of disperses them.
that would make the most sense.
Hmm.
Usually there's a sort of blast crater left behind,
Mm.
and there's ink in that, but it drains relatively quickly. It
Hmm.
can't really sustain itself, especially not in the optimal situation would be somewhere where it can get direct sunlight. It
Mm.
hates light.
Ah, that makes sense.
That's part of the reason that some of my classmates were absolutely indisposable when it came to dealing with certain overblots.
Mm.
There were only a,
Had light related.
yeah, there were only a couple people who used light magic.
Mm.
Rook, Kaleem, and Silver were the only ones I knew who could use light magic instead of void magic.
Hmm. This is you. We have a plan.
We have a plan! Holy shit! We have a plan!
Yeah.
This this might actually be doable.
Yes. Now, correct me if I'm wrong. The other, ideally, the other overblots would happen before yours
Yes, I don't know what would happen to them if
if you went first.
yeah, I
I'm not sure either,
I
because you are kind of the holder of ink space.
I'm kind of the host. Yeah. And if this thing goes out with me, then
Mm-hmm.
best case scenario, it's no longer a problem. Worst case
Mm-hmm.
scenario, we do all of this and it's for nothing
Mm-hmm.
because ink space persists and basically all we've done is reset a clock.
Mm-hmm.
And also, people are still affected. Not ideal.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
There are two more cases that I can feel, sense, that
Mm-hmm.
I know of. I have been using the random bouts of narcolepsy to, for lack of a better term, organize this shit.
Mm.
I can. The worse I
In ink
get, the
space?
more control I seem to have over ink space.
Ah, that makes a odd sort of sense.
It's like the more that it becomes a part of me, the more I can control it.
Mm-hmm.
It's like it's using me as its brain.
Mm-hmm.
So I've
Well, it hasn't got any, so.
Yeah, that's kind of what happens when you give thought to a thoughtless entity. It kind of wants to keep it.
Mm-hmm.
But I have been able to, when I fall asleep, I wind up in ink space, and I've been able to that use that time to sort of pull things together,
Mm-hmm.
organize them by which ones are currently relevant, which ones are most recent, which ones the victims are already dead. Um,
Uh,
but I have a basically a corridor of the ones that I can tell are in Inkwell.
mm-hmm.
And there are two left.
Okay.
4 of them have been resolved. 2 remain.
Okay. That's Crystal and one other.
Yeah, I don't know who. I
Mm.
I've been trying to think of people I've interacted with, but I don't know anyone who would feel like that. There's
Mm.
the door burns to touch.
Yes, you described an oak door, I think.
Yeah.
I I don't I can't think of anybody who at least I would associate that sort of imagery with. I could just not know them.
Entirely possible. And I unfortunately know too many people. I don't. If I just knew 6 people, this would be a lot easier.
True.
Also, a lot more difficult because I wouldn't have the help I do, but still.
Mm. Mm. Mm.
I. Hmm, I don't know anyone associated so strongly with fire. I mean, I know an enemy has a pet fire bird, but
Anemone. Who's Anemone?
uh, she's nice. She comes to visit me sometimes. Um, we met in a park. I kind of, well, I was chilling under a tree. She kind of tripped on me, and then we had a lovely conversation.
Hmm.
This was before I went into quarantine.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
uh, she was nice.
Mm.
Apparently, she knows some of the other people who've overblotted.
Oh. Oh, wait. So, do you remember which ones?
I know she mentioned. Let me rephrase. I know she showed up for Current's Overblot.
I don't think I know a current.
And
Wait a second. No, there was that paint fest. He was at the paint fest. He was sort of a, well, I mean, I guess the name gives it away, but some sort of water associated. I don't know. What would it?
according to the book of shenanigans that I've been given on what sorts of peoples live in Zatori, I think they're a water genasi.
Ah. Mm-hmm. That that makes sense.
Yeah, they were the most recent case, hence Shoreline.
Ah, right, right.
But they've showed up somewhere else before. Not in person, but both, I think, if I remember right, at the very least Current, and I think Current and Anemone both
Mm.
showed up in Quinn's severance room.
Oh, who does Quinn know? I don't know Quinn well enough. He. Hmm. I wonder. No, I don't think I know enough about his connections to guess who they might be to him.
I'm not
Hmm.
sure. I. Let me rephrase. I have thoughts, but I don't think it's my place to speculate. My job when it
Mm.
comes to Inkspace is to help clear the puzzles and solve the problems. It's not to pry into other people's personal history. I
Mm-hmm.
I'm already prying into their history and their problems enough just by seeing them in that state. I don't want to make them feel more exposed than they have to be.
Mm-hmm.
I try to be polite about my magical mental invasions.
Yes. Well.
None of us are there voluntarily. The least I can do is make it not an ordeal.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. I think uh, Crystal would appreciate that sort of sentiment.
Hopefully she does, because we'll have to deal with hers eventually. Hers doesn't seem to be. Ugh, it's so difficult to measure how far along a case is just from the state of the door alone. I know her key hasn't started to appear yet. The others
Mm-hmm.
has.
Mm.
I,
Huh.
but I still can't sense the feelings behind that door the way that I can sense the feelings on Crystal's. Maybe it's just because I know Crystal more
that
personally than I know whoever this is.
that could be it.
I know that the more I know and understand someone, the more, for lack of a better term, feedback I get from them.
Mm-hmm.
But regardless, it would be for the best for everyone involved if we handled the two remaining cases and prevented any further cases before
Mm. Right.
before getting me squared away.
Yes. Okay. So that does mean that you'll need to hold on for a while longer yet. But,
I've held out this long.
right. We should try to avoid any sort of strange um, mishaps like what happened last time. I don't blame you for doing what you did. I don't know what else you could have done that would have got the job done.
Thank you!
But
Everyone
it's
keeps
it's
calling me an idiot.
it's not like you have um it's not like you had a
I didn't
like
exactly
a
have a Brita filter on hand.
no or some elemental wizard on speed dial, and even then, you know, who knows how long they would take to get there.
Mm-hmm. I trust me, I get that it was dangerous to me to do it, but it was the best option. It was the fastest thing I could think of, and I knew it would work.
Yes. So going forward, we're going to try to limit putting you in that situation as much as possible. If the people who, if it's in a sort of bad situation again where it might contaminate something, um, try to see if the people who are left, the people who helped, can do something about it.
Right.
Um,
I
even
try
if
to
it
avoid that because, they're already spent from using up their magic in the thing, but
true, it uh, to be honest, they can probably afford to strain themselves a little more than you can in that situation.
probably. I hate thinking like that, but yeah. I don't know. I've had enough people refer to me as a pawn in their own works that I hate having to think of other
Mm.
people like that, even if it is a matter of survival.
Well, perhaps consider this. If you ask them for help, they can say no. They can refuse to do it. They're not your pawn in that case. You've not manipulated them into needing to do it.
True. As long as their free will is retained, it's not as bad.
No,
I mean,
it's
it's
not
still
like
not.
you're casting a charm on them.
Ugh, God, no. Ew. I hate enchantment magic.
Mm.
So, I mean, some of it is useful. The sleep spell that I learned
Mm.
with Old Trade, very useful. Also, very funny. Basically, it's a spell song of reverse psychology go the fuck to bed. The song itself is called Stay Awake, and
Ah,
if you sing it, the people around you will slowly get more and more sleepy until eventually they just drop off and get a good night's sleep for 8 hours, and they can't resist it. It's very funny.
That does sound quite fun.
I've had to use it so many times when some of my classmates would insist on trying to cram for tests at the last minute. And it would just be like, no, you're not going to remember any of this in the morning. Go the fuck to sleep. Don't make me pull the magic bullshit on you.
Absolutely, I believe it. University students can be so
Stubborn,
obstinate. Yes.
bullheaded, just generally full of themselves. I mean, I get it.
Sure.
I get it. Studying for a test is a pain, but maybe if you had actually listened to me and gone with me to the libraries to study for exams, you wouldn't be in this fucking position, you cotton-headed ninnymuggins. I'm fine. I'm normal. I'm not salty.
Well, I think as long as we managed to run damage control over the next two overblots, then hopefully your condition won't be worsened too much so that you'll be strong enough when it's time to do yours to, uh, well, cast and keep that going as long as it needs to.
And I'll also need to keep my strength up in order to have the willpower to avoid trying to do something else.
Mm-hmm.
Because knowing myself and knowing how Overblot works, it's going to try and compel me to do something else.
Mm.
There are
Something.
a lot of old trade spells, and some of them can be very useful when one wants to get away from people to avoid hurting them.
I see. Hmm.
There was an idea I had when I was in a really bad way a couple weeks ago that I had to basically smack myself in the brain for because I know it's a terrible idea, but the spell Once Upon a Dream works a bit like the spell Imprisonment from this world, or one of the
Oh,
variations of
fine.
it.
Yes, I'm familiar.
Once Upon a
The slumber
Dream,
version.
yeah, it, but it's not just on one person. It's
Oh.
it can be big. The last
Ah.
time I saw it used, it covered an entire island.
Ooh.
It can be useful. It can be very useful because what it does is traps the people caught within it in a dream of, for some of them, it's the best times in their life, for some of them, it's the worst times in their life. And
Mm.
either can be useful. But
Mm-hmm.
I I
You
got
thought about it.
I thought about it the other day. Well, not the other day. I thought about it a few months ago, not to affect anyone else, but to affect myself, to put myself in a
Mm-hmm.
sort of stasis until whatever it whatever could be done to fix this was found.
Until something could get better.
Because
Not not an unreasonable logic train, but
it would be giving up
mm,
because I would have to set some kind of condition for my being woken up, and I don't know what condition I'd have to set.
mm-hmm.
And besides that, that would be very selfish of me to run away to dreamland while everybody else around me is suffering for something that's my responsibility. I can't exactly go doing that.
You're very responsible.
I try to be.
You are. Don't blame yourself, especially when influenced by the blot, considering what it does, for having selfish thoughts that go against what you want to do, because they're, well, even without the plot, some of that would be just natural. It's just being amplified. It's it's not wrong to want to try to uh, preserve yourself. Self preservation is healthy, but it can be twisted.
Yeah. Thank you for that.
Mm. Well, if you need help um, when those sort of thoughts come up again, um, I'm sure probably some of the people who were over recently uh, would be willing to lend you an ear.
I'm pretty sure I have several people who would, quite frankly, talk me right the fuck out of it.
Good.
Probably break down my door and be like, I think the hell not.
Mm-hmm.
Don't you fucking dare, etc.
Mm-hmm.
I've met so many
Good.
good people. I really am lucky.
I'm glad that this place seems to be treating you better.
So am I. It's it's a nice change. And I think of all the places to get stuck forever, or stuck until whoever else decides to kidnap me
Mm.
manages to get their hands on me, then of all the places to be stuck, this is probably one of the better ones.
I think so. I do wonder, um, the way you've described your classmates in the mirror and the teachers and such, everyone seems very, very self centered, very individualistic. I wonder if that's Crowley's influence by making the, well, I mean, some sort of direct consequence of trying to make that uh, shadow confrontation into a single person event. I wonder if that and his own just sort of philosophies is part of why everyone over there is like that.
I mean, it would make sense. He was the primary educator for several generations of magic users. If he,
An educator can be extremely influential in both good ways and bad,
mm-hmm, and
especially if given several generations to work with.
right, and if it's, I mean, it wasn't just the shadow confrontation. He made an individualized thing. It used to be that most spells were collaborative. Because, like I said, old trade is fucking malleable as hell. It's
Mm,
squishy. You need a lot of hands on deck to sort of squish it into the right shape. Or,
I see. So what he teaches now is more similar to our magic, where it's more uh, singular.
yeah, it's also a lot smaller. Like I said, old
Hmm.
trade makes the world move. It
Hmm.
changes everything around it. It can make something from nothing.
Mm.
The healing spell that I told you about, I didn't have that plant anywhere near me. I was pulling on the
Mm.
idea of that plant and using its basically conceptual image to pull
Mm-hmm.
on its power when it was nowhere near me. I have no idea where it is. I'm sure it probably existed somewhere in that world, but I didn't know where it
Mm.
was. I certainly couldn't get my hands on it.
Right. That
Meanwhile,
is extremely powerful.
yeah, it's insane. And it's not like the spells in this world or the spells that Crowley taught that needed spell components and specific words. Well, I mean, the words kind of, but even those
Mm.
you could change around if you needed to.
Mm-hmm.
That's, again, that's how I altered poor unfortunate souls from a soul contract to a light show. But Crowley's form of spells are smaller. It's
Mm-hmm.
there's a lot of combative magic, which makes sense because combat is one of the things that comes in handy in that world because people just keep going crazy and trying to do stupid shit and need to be punched in the face until they start regrowing their brain cells.
Mm-hmm.
But it was smaller and it was more controlled and it was more predictable and it was able to be done by one person. There was healing
Mm-hmm.
magic that could be done by a single doctor, and that was very useful. I know because
Right.
I had it used on me.
Mm-hmm.
The aftermath of Malleus's Overblot was rough on everyone.
Mm.
And let me tell you, being point blank on an entire dragon skull worth of glass shards.
Oof.
Ow!
Mm. Yes.
That hurt like a bitch. But
Mm-hmm.
it makes sense with how he is. It always baffled me that he complained about how his students were so self centered, so confident in their own abilities when
It's his own damn fault.
he was walking around talking himself up like, oh, what was his favorite one? Truly, I am the most magnanimous of men.
Ugh.
Ugh,
As if.
I don't think he even knows what that word means.
I bet he probably doesn't.
He just likes the alliteration. That has to be it.
Probably. And the uh polysyllabic nature of it.
And the self aggrandizement.
Absolutely.
I once called him a dumbass
Well,
to his face, and he didn't understand me because he didn't
different
speak
language.
English.
Aha.
It's amazing the
Uh,
things you can get away with when you smile at someone and talk at them in a language they don't understand.
language barriers can be a pain, but they can also be a little fun sometimes.
They can be very fun. They can be very useful.
Mm.
Part of the reason that Dyer and I are so close is because she actually picked up on English, common, old trade faster than most other people. And we were able to
Mm.
talk to each other in
That's nice.
that language and they wouldn't understand us. It was small things at first, but eventually she taught me enough of her language and I taught her enough of mine that we were able to communicate.
Mm-hmm. Very nice.
Yeah.
Well, maybe with the overplot gone from the mirror, maybe maybe something will change over there, but with Crowley still around, I'm not sure.
With him
Hope he
around,
bites
and
it.
I think a lot of
And I don't
people would
say
agree
that
with you.
lightly. Hmm.
I think a lot of people would agree with you. I just hope that somehow, some way, I or somebody acting as my proxy gets to smack him over the head before he does.
Mm. Is he immortal? Or just extremely long lived?
He's he's a fairy. They're functionally immortal unless killed. I mean, they can be killed a number of ways, of course, but uninterrupted, they will live forever.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. I'm familiar.
Which honestly sounds dreadful, but maybe I just find immortality terrifying.
Um, no, I think you're right. It has its pros, but it certainly has plenty of cons. It's overrated, really. Most of the things that people want from immortality, they can get from merely an extended lifespan, not a indefinite one.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, think about it. If a human could live another 100 years, they would pretty much get done all the things that they want to do without the mm,
Well,
sort of
living so long that life loses meaning.
exactly.
Yeah. I. Ugh, immortality is one of those things that's always terrified me. I never understood why
Mm,
people wanted it. It's the idea of watching the world change without you. Ugh, freaks me out.
mm. There's something appealing to it to some people, but it takes a certain sort to not just go mad.
Yeah, I think most people don't really want to be immortal as much as they are scared of dying, which I can relate.
Mm-hmm.
Dying is terrifying,
Certainly.
but
Mm-hmm.
the solution to that isn't to the solution to that isn't to stay alive forever. It's to not die until you're ready,
Mm-hmm.
or at the very least
See, yes, you're on the same page.
to take advantage of what time you have to get done as much of what you want to do as you can. And sure, there's probably going to be
Exactly.
unfinished business left when you do die, but
Mm-hmm.
well, that's everybody. That's why they're ghosts.
Mm, certainly. I mean, and even like uh, elves around here will live up to maybe 700 at their oldest. Um, and well, they can go all that time and still, you know, think of something that they want to do the day before it's over. And you just can't, the world just has so many things in it. You can't just stop. You can't expect to have expended it before it's over. It's just very silly.
Yeah. It reminds me of something one of my friends said. Back at
Mm,
back at home, my friend Rio and I we were kind of on the same page about a lot of things, but this was the one place where we differed.
mm.
He was terrified of the idea of dying because he was so scared of all of the things that he would inevitably have loved that he would miss out on. All the stories he would
Uh,
never get to hear, all the games he would never get to play,
mm-hmm,
all the events he would miss, all the people he would never get to meet.
mm,
He was terrified of that. Me, thought that, well, the fact that there is such a finite scope of who you'll meet, what you'll get to do, what you'll get to see, what you get to interact with, makes me feel a lot luckier to get to interact with that which I already have.
Hmm.
Because,
It makes special, makes it unique.
exactly, I'm lucky enough to exist in the same time and space as all of the wonderful people I've gotten to meet. All of the great music I've got to listen to, all of the
Mhm.
amazing stories I've got to hear and experience. I'm lucky enough to exist in the same time as them. That's a 1 in a million chance.
Mhm. I wish more people thought like that.
It's it's definitely a rarer perspective from what I've heard. But I don't know. Maybe I've just read too much.
Perhaps.
Too many
I don't
stories about people who gain immortality and live to regret it, or gain
know.
some way of cheating death only to watch everyone they love die. That sounds miserable.
Mm, mm. He uh just sort of like looks away in that moment. Mm, well, you'll there's a plenty of that in reality here. You should look up liches sometime.
Ugh. Is there anything like what a lich was in folklore back at home? That sounds terrifying. Big, spooky, undead things with creepy
Hmm.
powers. No, thank you.
Oh yes.
No, thank you. We hard pass on that. Man, we actually have a plan to keep me alive.
We do.
That's. I didn't actually think we could come up with that.
You came up with a lot of it yourself. I think I just helped as a sounding board.
You pushed me in the right direction.
Hmm.
It's a hard thing to be hopeful when you've got something in your head screaming at you that every single plan isn't going to work.
That's true.
So he kind of leans over and bumps his shoulder against the professor. Thanks for letting me outsource my hope.
Hmm. I think he reaches over and ruffles his hair.
You laughs. Do we want to call it there?
Yeah. Wow.
Every time I have an FPS with you, we get so much done. All right, let's say goodbye to the listeners. Bye bye, listeners.
Bye, listeners.